Hey everybody, it's your buddy Beard Grizzly, and last time I mentioned that there was another side theory I had that fed directly from the information we talked about with Cayde's life, and that is in regards to Ace. If you didn't watch that previous video, I'll have it up in the title cards for you to click on, if you at least like all of that reference material at your fingertips, but I'll at least showcase a few of the entries that really matter to us as we go along. Before we keep going, however, keep in mind that a good majority of this is a bit of spin foil, but the evidence that is around is pretty high to at least prove points of his theory. Per usual, Destiny only gives us a piece, and sometimes we have to fill in the blanks with educated guesses. Let's start off with something that happened back in May before the launch of Warmind. Whether or not this is a little mention that was actually canonical or meant to be in full relation to Clovis Bray or not, well, I'll let you be the judge.
It's been an interesting construct of science fiction where you have the company, you have the corporation, and you have the evidence of commerce, whether it's Wayland Yutani or whether it's the Tyrell Corporation. So right. Clovis Bray is our own storytelling.
Wayland Yutani and the Tyrell Corporation. Oh, Bungie, why would you want to connect two of the most notorious and awful corporations in sci-fi history? Just why? Let me give you a crash course into these two companies as fast as I can in case you're not familiar with these somewhat older sci-fi movies and why Deej brought up these two names. Thankfully, both have some recent movies that were made surrounding them, where Wayland Yutani is related to the Alien franchise and the Tyrell Corporation is related to Blade Runner. First off, if you're not familiar with these films and are able to watch them, do so, though you can totally skip Alien 3 and 4, just for sanity's sake. Both Blade Runners are pretty darn good movies, but anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Wayland Yutani has one penultimate goal, and that has been to research and understand the implications of the xenomorph. Xenomorphs are the aliens within the series, and they have this nasty habit of killing humans and otherwise, or anything really that comes in their path, just not getting along with everyone. It's the general gist with these things. They've tried to really explain the basis of the xenomorph and where it came from in the two newer movies of Prometheus and Alien Covenant, but it's a bit of a mess. I still enjoy the films all the same, but I don't know, it felt like a mess. Okay, Beard, this isn't a movie review, stop it. The Tyrell Corporation, on the other hand, is a bit different entirely, and perhaps what we'll focus on the most throughout our look into what I have to say about Ace. Yeah, I know this is a long road to go here, but just bear with me. Tyrell focused most of their efforts on robotics. In particular, they worked on groups called the Replicants, which were able to look, act, think, and function very similar to what humanity has. To my understanding of the films, they were mostly put into service as laborers, especially on far-off colonies that served to only be dangerous for humanity as a whole. Things like mining, ship piloting, and so on. Anything that caused humans to be put in danger, they were basically built for that purpose. There was one issue, however. Some of the newer model replicants started to gain free will and act out on their own. This basically starts into the plot of the first movie, and it can change in interpretation based on which version of the film you watch. Personally, I'm a big fan of the more recent director's cut, but I know everyone has a favorite version they enjoy. I think that's one reason I like the second movie a bit more, since it is still cryptic, but it's still a bit more straightforward. The part that really is worth talking about, however, of the major plot is ingrained memories within these replicants. Replicants are given a general set of protocols to follow. They are given some basic memories to work with and otherwise act upon to make them more believably human. They are, however, marked to ensure they do not break the law easily, and most times are not allowed within human-filled areas. It's a segregation story at its heart. Anyway, as some of these replicants start to blend in with the rest of humans, being that they look and act exactly like them, for the most part, Blade Runners are the ones that need to spot them, and they do this by judging a replicant's reaction to a series of questions. These questions are meant to spike an emotional response, but generally in humans they are meant to simply make the human go, what? It's a Turing test, effectively, if you're familiar with the term. The basis is to ask a computer a series of questions and see if the computer realizes it's a computer or not. That's the gist. Really basic gist, anyway. The whole process, though, makes the replicants go into a causal loop of, well, why are you asking me this question? And it's really emphasized at the first film. It's really well done. Now, let's actually make this work for us in the realm of Destiny. Whenever I hear something on a Bungie stream, I always have to consider it's at least an inspiration that was used to give us a tie back to how the game is flowing. So, how does it fit? Of course, the first thing I think of with the Tyrell Corporation is how they manufactured robots that looked and acted like human beings. The Exo, of course, fit this bill to a T. Maybe not exactly with the external looks, granted, but very similar in how they act, since they are based off of complete human brains. Or minds, I guess is more the way to say it. In some of the more recent information we've been given about Exos thanks to the files we've all dubbed the Fry files, as they're voiced by Stephen J. Fry, lovingly, we have a bit more information on what Clovis Bray needs to do in order to create an Exo. I'm going to let this whole thing play as it's extremely important. We'll go section by section, however.
Early experiments in exoscience managed to encode the human consciousness into a form that could be processed digitally. At the time, we believed that was the big hurdle to overcome in the creation of the Exo. Little did we know, the real challenge would be the phenomenon known as dissociative exomind rejection. Nascent proto-exos developed serious symptoms of cognitive disorder that eventually led to death. It turned out the human mind would not reconcile its presence in a new body.
By the sounds of things, the first attempts of the Exo project failed. Proto-Exo or early Exo experiments just failed almost outright. They were missing a serious component. As it is, the conditions of why the Exo program came around are a bit unclear, but that's for another time in my speculation on why it makes sense. Anyway, something was missing for early Exo, and this led to test subjects dying out. This would possibly indicate that several people lost their lives while trying to build an Exo, especially if what we have thought of them previously is true, that their consciousness is taken from a human and placed directly into the Exo form. Granted, as we know from last time, Clovis had plenty of test subjects that he could play with that had debts that needed to be wiped away so that they wouldn't affect their family or their other livelihoods. Cayde was just one of them. Oh, before I forget, you're going to hear DER later on. This is the dissociative exomind rejection that Fry had said a little earlier. This is somewhat similar to what happens to you if you have another limb replace your own, or more commonly a new organ that isn't your own, say a kidney or otherwise. Over time, your body will reject the foreign tissue, even if it accepts it early on. This seems to be the case of our minds inside of an exo body, as it is in our original flesh and blood.
It took multiple iterations in design, but the Clovis Bray Corporation eventually developed several solutions. The first is to reboot the mind once it has been transferred, allowing it to awaken inside its new shell as though it were being reborn. This has side effects of memory loss and fragmentation, but it's highly effective in the prevention of DER. The reboot process can be repeated multiple times to further the odds of survival. It is not currently known how many times a human consciousness can be rebooted, but scientists estimate it to be around 20.
So to fight off the issues of DER, or this course of your mind literally rejecting the new body you have, Clovis found out that it would be best to reboot the consciousness in hopes that it would reseed itself. This would erase new events and memories that you may have had, and as Cayde puts it in Treasure Island, his personal journal, at your center, safe and untouched, sits the original you. Just a little box tucked at the back of a closet, filled with trinkets and odd notions kept for no obvious reason. You have no idea when you last spoke to this tangle, but that's what you do now, using a whisper and the lightest touch, being all sorts of cautious because you're afraid of frightening whatever wants to speak with you. So the original consciousness of the human being is then placed inside of an exo and then reset to not remember what it is that it's taken in from that life or otherwise. You just go back to the reverted form that you were previously. Talk about a way to reset rejection syndrome. Still, that's not where this ends.
The second preventative measure to DER is to program certain humanisms within exos. As machines, they have not the physical needs to eat or reproduce like real humans, but artificially injecting that drive has been clinically proven to reduce the odds of DER. Further experimentation is required to perfect the EXO project, but you can be assured that Clovis Bray is at the forefront in the field of exoscience.
This is the most damning piece of evidence that I need against Clovis Bray and how they play with the mind of an exo. If they're able to actually program in humanistic traits like a libido, a want to eat, drink, or any other physical activity that may have driven them previously, how much of that would have undergone screening beforehand of the human individual? Is it assumed that a person's want for food or drink is similar to that of another's? That a want for a person's touch or vocal closeness is similar in all humans? This would require a high amount of understanding chemical balances within a human being, but that isn't mentioned here at all. Going with the implication that they do not screen their candidates, however, this would imply that programming an exo mind is, in fact, possible. And suddenly, the links to Tyrell Corporation make a lot more sense. Tyrell makes entirely artificial creations. They have no actual humanistic past or otherwise. As I mentioned earlier, however, they are implanted with memories and thoughts that make it possible to have them be swayed by whatever Tyrell may want them to be swayed by. It's that one thing that they hold dear, or a couple things that they hold dear, and anything that may threaten to break that, they hold on to like it's the last and only thing that they own. It's a means of control and a way to keep the replicants in check. Well, this is the next thing to look into. We've seen that Clovis has the means to program something into an exo, but memory is something complex. It's something that the universe in Blade Runner has a hard time creating, and due to this, it's seen as a complete art form to make memories for a replicant. But what if those memories can be implanted in other ways? Say, with a journal. Let's highlight the journal entries that we had from Cayde's life before turning into an exo. There are only a few, like I said, that are very important to read over, so these are the ones we're going to highlight. So there you have it, Ace. That's why I did what I did. I had no choice, really. It was that or the great beyond. Just know your dad did what he had to do if I ever wanted to see you and your mother again. You probably won't recognize me since I'll be, well, a robot and all. But I'll find you. I promise. What can I say? I was just in too deep, Ace. I had to do something, for your sake above all. I had lost any hope of cashing in, and to be honest, that big payday wasn't coming, not with the jobs I was finding. So when I got word of what was going on out there, there's one line that catches me off guard in this first entry. Just know your dad did what he had to do if I ever wanted to see you and your mother again. Perhaps it's me reading into things too far, but it could also be the clue I need for a lot of this to make sense. If Cayde-6 just woke up and started to leaf through this supposed journal that he's been writing inside of for all this time, I just find it funny that he would have to place the word dad into the language of the entry that we see here. Far as we know, this is his first entry that he has access to, and perhaps Clovis had an entire entry book that was made for him previously to implant these memories into him. I'm not saying that they would have one for every exo, perhaps just the ones that they're having issues with integrating or otherwise. Anyway, I'm getting a bit off topic. The fact that this line says, your dad and your mother, again would indicate that Clovis would be trying to create a level of familial bonding with Cayde. This would make his assimilation of these memories a bit easier, as by base instinct, humans generally run after a certain age. to look into a family, to create a family. It's a ticking biological clock. It continues with what his issues were for joining up on the EXO program to begin with, and that is no hope of cashing in based on all of the debt he had accrued over his life. Both of these are simply centerpiece entries in order to set a reasoning as to why he would have turned himself into an EXO, and it's a good starting point for all of this that we'll look into. The next entry, however, gives me all the verification that I need to understand why the fabrication of these books is even more possible. This has been fun, I guess, but it'll all be gone tomorrow. I've been what they call compromised, which is funny because I feel fine. Could use a few upgrades, but what EXO couldn't? But compromised means they are going inside my brain to wipe it from my memory. Met an interesting fellow EXO who leaves letters like these in caches, so whatever she gets saddled with next time, she might come across one and take a trip down lost memory lane. Ace, know that when I find you, I will never let them find me. Pick up on what I mean? Met an interesting fellow EXO who leaves letters like this in caches. For me, this indicates that Cayde has never participated in this practice before, and this would mean the only thing he's had previously was his journal, which it seems he kept on him at all times. Now, if the process of resetting an EXO requires a Clovis Bray facility, this would mean he would need to be saddled up in a type of machine for a time period undisclosed to us. This would also mean that Clovis Bray would have access to his journal. If he took this possession from Cayde and made it a point to leaf through it and replace bits and pieces of his journal to hide important information from him or from leaking out into the public, well, it would be a perfect time to do so. After this entry, we see several more that give us hints that Cayde was able to keep a cap on some information that he might not have been good for allowing Clovis to leak out. Especially talks about a proto-civilization that came before humans and digging into places on other planets that they shouldn't have been. Yeah, bad news bears for Clovis Bray. This establishes several pieces of proof, or at least most proof that I can find, which showcases a clear indication that Cayde's records and notes could be tampered with, and the thoughts that he has been given are not his own, fabricated by a company that is out to keep him alive for their own gains. This ties back to what it seems is mission after mission, with no specified time linked to how long a tour of duty would be considered for the triple lifespan that humans now held. These are little knowns of the Golden Age, which is frankly looking a lot less golden. This really doesn't even talk about the position that Anna Bray had served within Clovis Bray, where she was a psycholinguist. She says, however, if you want to insult me, call me a neurolinguist. Within the diary entry called The Unsolvable Problem, we see that Clovis Bray is working with this exact kind of machine learning and thought process. This is not out of the realm of possibility, especially as Rasputin, Anna's seemingly first subject, calls the EXO his. It all just seems to conveniently wrap into a ball and really just fall into place. But ultimately, what does this mean? Well, as the title suggests, Ace may not be real at all. Cayde even indicates this in a conversation with Failsafe after arriving on Nessus, and even in an entry of his journal previously. I've read both of these very recently in the last video, but I'll leave both entries up on the screen for you to read over all the same, just in case. If Cayde is even considering that Ace and his wife may not be real even before he's resurrected as a Guardian, before the Traveler's influence starts to infect his body, well, it just sends up a lot of red flags to me. As much as Ace and Cayde have become a connected part of Destiny 2's overall story, and we've seen how Cayde has attached to this character, it plays a bit too well into being all entirely faked by a company that just wanted ownership of his soul, another test subject for the pile. It also leaves the possibility open that EXO are not the full original human being shoved into a tiny box within an EXO. They could be an emulated program that's been stuck inside of a small box. This would be akin to double sleeving in Altered Carbon for those that have watched that, or perhaps the issues with the game Soma released several years ago, in which the original would still exist, but the copy would carry on like they were, in fact, the original. Starts being the question, who is actually the original? Cayde very well could have carried on with his wife and son, if they did exist previously, without a single issue. The Exo we know of today could be a carbon copy, or something somewhat familiar or similar. Or, to keep things quiet, Clovis may have silenced Cayde. For good. Still, what I spoke of here is tentative at best. It doesn't mean that this is how things have gone, and there is plenty to suggest that Ace, Cayde, and his wife were really around the time of the Golden Age. It all comes down to perspective. But for me, especially when dealing with Clovis Bray, I can't help but see a black-lined company that tries to do whatever they want under the guise of helping humanity push forward. We know plenty of dark labels on this company from the entries of Siva from the Rise of Iron expansion, Owl Sector, and how that expanded our thoughts and the records we're in. And we see another entry entitled 18 Kelvins from the sidearm of the same name. I never thought I'd be carrying a gun. I'm a scientist, not some kind of soldier. But the way things have been going in the labs, I just don't feel safe anymore. I've heard rumors of what happened with the Siva project and some of the people involved. Let's just say they aren't answering their emails. Willa has been seen roaming the halls, keeping an eye on us. At least this sidearm is easy to conceal. I just hope I never have to actually use it. Braytech Scientist Journal Entry. Clovis hides many secrets from both the public and their own employees. I mentioned Wayland Yutani earlier, about an alien race that they were looking for. I think you know where we're going next time. That is when I'm able. I have to round this out on 2 quick notes, as Forsaken is, obviously, right around the corner. With that being the case, I want to make sure I take the time to dig in the lore and all of its facets. I also will need to play the game at some point or another, and unfortunately my time off options are kind of minimal. That means I will be eating, breathing, and sleeping Forsaken for a while, or at least for a little bit, so I can make sure I keep up with content as best I can, and especially to keep in touch with you guys. I will be generally current with the lore, meaning I will not be referencing material that is not released in the game just yet. But anyways, I'm carrying this on a bit too long. I just hope you all have a fantastic time with Forsaken, and check back when you're able to. I'll get my thoughts out there as soon as I can. The second note I wanted to bring up real fast is thank you guys for 25,000 subscribers. If you guys listened to my video previously that I just popped out about my hopes for Forsaken and so on, just to reiterate, if you guys have any thoughts of what you would like to see for a special for 25k, let me know below. Be it ask me anything, tips on how to create videos, stuff like that. I would love to hear your suggestions below. Thank you ahead of time if you give me any insight on that. But anyway, let's close this thing out. If you enjoyed what you listened to, think I'm off my rocker, whatever else you may want to tell me, leave a comment below. Hit the other buttons that you see around on the screen. You know how YouTube works. To Guardians and non-Guardians alike, I'll see you next Spacetime. Take care.